again, you are taking me to a space which is not the right framework, because you are talking of Gaza as if it was a standalone entity. No, Krishnan. The Palestinian people have the exclusive, recognized right of self-determination in the little that remains of their land. My job as a special rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territory, I am mandated by the United Nations Human Rights Council to document and report the violations of international law that takes place in the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem.
I just want to ask you finally, you're the subject of threats right now.
Meet Francesca Albanese, ladies and gentlemen, a fearless international law expert and commentator with a knack of slicing through political doublespeak. Known for her incisive critiques and unwavering commitment to human rights, Francesca has built a reputation by calling out the hypocrisy that lets double standards thrive. In her latest interview, she takes aim at Krishnan's contradictory stance, exposing how his selective outrage conveniently justifies acts of terror under the guise of resistance while ignoring the brutal reality of war crimes. With a blend of biting humor and raw honesty, Francesca reminds us that justice isn't just served by half measures or a moral wiggle room. It demands consistency, accountability, and a clear-eyed challenge to any narrative that distorts the truth. Let's jump in.
I'm asking you, are you clear that what happened on October the 7th and the Hamas incursion into Israel and killing whoever they came across, was that an attempt at genocide?
Whatever it was, it doesn't justify.
I'm not asking you that. I'm not asking you that. I'm just asking you,
telling you that,
in terms of the act itself.
Look,
what was it?
I don't think it was an act of genocide. It was despicable. It was inhumane. It was criminal to the extent it hit civilians, and it has been also documented by the Commission of Inquiry, who has investigated what has happened inside Israel. And I'm not going to question that. I've condemned the killing of Israeli civilians from the very first moment, and so the abduction of civilians. But whatever, the reason why I'm saying that is that since the very first hours, there have been people in Israel saying, oh, we have been victims of a genocide, which has been used with all also the misinformation that has followed to portray the Palestinians as an existential threat for what they had allegedly supported happening on October 7, and therefore justifying the brutal, revengeful response that had happened. But this is the beauty of international law, that the Genocide Convention says whatever the reason, whatever self-defense, even self-defense doesn't justify a genocide.
Yeah, no, that's a separate question as to what justifies it. I'm just asking you in terms of what happened. You're clear it was war crimes, it was illegal. Because what you've also said in the past is that there is a right to resist.
Of course.
So just explain, what is, do you see what happened as October the 7th as resistance, or was it straightforwardly war crimes, illegal and terrible?
I'm glad you're asking this question, because I think there is so much confusion. So in international law, people who are under oppression and under foreign domination have a right to resist, and this is similar to what a state has as self-defense. So states have their sovereignty. So states that exist have to be protected in their sovereign space, and if they are threatened by another state, they have the right to use war, to use force in the form of self-defense. People have a right of self-determination, so a right to exist as a people in a given land. Therefore, when they are oppressed, when they have to protect the right of self-determination.
So that means Hamas has the right to fight
people
within Gaza?
Mm-hmm. No. Again, you are taking me to a space which is not the right framework, because you are talking of Gaza as if it was a standalone entity. No, Krishnan. The Palestinian people have the exclusive, recognized right of self-determination in the little that remains of their land, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem, which Israel is unlawfully occupied. And let me remind the audience that in July last year, the International Court of Justice has ordered Israel to withdraw its presence from the occupied Palestinian territory entirely, totally and unconditionally, the military presence, to dismantle the settlements and to stop controlling the Palestinian natural resources. This is an obligation that has implications also for the UK, which means there shouldn't be any recognition of what Israel does in the occupied Palestinian territory as legal, including the exercise of what you are calling self-defense. This is the law. And there is also an obligation not to do anything that results in aiding and assisting the occupation. Krishnan, this is the discussion we need to have, because this is the framework in which, yes, the Palestinians as a people have under international law the right to defend themselves, to resist as a way to defend themselves as a people, which have limitations.
Yeah, but what does that mean in terms of actual action? So when Hamas fires rockets, is that an act of self-defense, or is this, as Israel portrays it, an act of terrorism?
Yeah, of course, Israel portrays it as an act of terrorism. Israel has the right, the obligation to withdraw from the occupied Palestinian territory. And if once this happens, it's attacked by the state of Palestine, it has the sacrosanct right to use and invoke, or rather, to invoke and use the right of the self-defense.
So to be clear then, on those rocket attacks, are you saying they are legal resistance?
I'm not saying anything that International Court of Justice has not said already for the past 20 years. Israel cannot invoke the self-defense against the people it occupies.
No, you're talking about what Israel's doing. I'm talking about what Hamas is doing. Is what Hamas does when it fires a rocket at an Israeli town, is that, in your terms, self-defense, or is it terrorism?
It can be both. If you target civilians, it can be both. So again, an act of resistance.
Well, those rocket attacks are untargeted, largely.
Look, an act of resistance can be criminal and therefore should be held accountable. So those who have committed crimes against any civilians through killing, brutalization, torture, or abduction need to be held accountable. But let me tell you, under international law, an unlawful act of the resistance doesn't delegitimize the resistance, while the occupation that Israel maintains in the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem is so unlawful that taints of illegality whatever it does, and it's not defensible. As the Court of Justice has reminded Israel, in many ways, the only legal way for Israel to exercise self-defense vis-à-vis the Palestinians is to withdraw its military and civilian presence from the occupied Palestinian territory and give the Palestinians an opportunity to live free as a people, and cannot justify the legitimate security risks that it faces to annihilate the Palestinians. So this is what's happening, Krishnan.
So what should the United Nations, the organization you work for, and international governments be doing now to stop what's going on?
As an independent expert of the United Nations, I can tell you, I can't remember another historical phase where the United Nations have been so fragmented and paralyzed. There is the legal component that has failed because no one has firmly reminded Israel that self-defense, other than in the global south, but the organization as such, should challenge the way Israel and Western states in particular interpret self-defense. Self-defense is something that has limits. Self-defense can be invoked in two circumstances: when it's authorized by the Security Council, or when it's a direct response to an attack, to a threat of an attack by another state. So not against a people maintained under occupation. This is the first thing. There has been a failure for the international community and that is represented as the United Nations to work as a platform to prevent conflict and then to resolve conflict. The question of Palestine has been treated as a humanitarian issue to deal with in perpetuity. Instead of, it's very easy to end the question of Palestine in line with international law. Instead, what the General Assembly has been turned into is kicking the can in the air, thanks to the influence of Western states, powerful Western states, which are kept on saying, there should be peace, there should be peace. But how can there be peace?
The truth is the UN is broken now, isn't it?
It's not broken. It's wounded, and it's not broken. And the point is that this is, for me, the silver lining is that this is an opportunity for a new reorganization of forces. It's the time of in a way, we are breaking the silence of what is happening in the occupied Palestinian territory. 2 years ago, it would have been impossible to talk of Israel as an apartheid state, imposing racial segregation. Now we do, because the International Court of Justice has said that. It would have been impossible to debate in TV whether Israel was committing acts of genocide or not. And now we do that also because there are Israeli leaders for the first time indicted for war crimes and crimes against humanity. Now we need to break the silos. We need to work as an international community able to take us away from this abyss and start working, recognizing all of us as equal. This is not happening, Krishnan.
Can I ask about you? Because you are also targeted by Israel supporters who accuse you of coming to this job with bias, of previous positions on Israel. In some cases, they accuse you of anti-Semitism straightforwardly. What do you think is going on there, and what is your response to it?
Look, I first of all, let's clarify what's this job, because this is something I'm doing voluntarily and really out of principle, because as a European, as a responsible European person, I'm so deeply, quintessentially against racism and violence, explicitly because our ancestors have been part of the genocide of the Jewish people, the Roma and Sinti, and all the genocides that have been committed against colonial people.
But did you come to this job with an open mind?
Of course. But open mind doesn't mean empty mind. I mean, I've produced a scholarship on the question of Palestine, so I'm knowledgeable. I'm very knowledgeable. If this is a liability, well, for whom? I mean, again, I wouldn't exaggerate the criticism against me, because I keep on being very respected and very well received by most governments in the world, and most importantly, including by the people in the West. Frankly, the fact that certain leaders don't want to meet me, I understand. I mean, I expect that people who are accused of complicity with war crimes and crimes against humanity and possibly genocide take an issue with me. But
does the British government receive you?
Not that I recall in the last 16 months. But it's important that the British people listen to this and take an issue eventually with the British government, because I say there is willful blindness and ignorance vis-a-vis the facts that have taken place and the legal qualifications thereof. Because my job as a special rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territory, I am mandated by the United Nations Human Rights Council to document and report the violations of international law that takes place in the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. So this is also to qualify what you were asking me about October 7. That has been investigated by a commission of inquiry, which is deeply, deeply antagonized by your government. So whatever we say is not listened to. It's very convenient. But let me tell you what my job requires from me. I'm required to be impartial, to document the facts objectively, and to assess them according to the applicable legal framework, which is humanitarian law, international human rights law, and the other conventions that are a complement to the human rights system. Once I've made my conclusions, it's not up to me to strive for equidistance among the parties, because here there are no parties. There is an unlawful occupier and an occupied people in perpetuity. There is a state that continues to advance what has the hallmark of settler colonial practices, and it's committing international crimes.
I'm not going to go into some of the history. I mean, you have apologized for talking about the Jewish lobby in the past, and you've never used it again. So we don't need to go into that necessarily here. I just want to ask you finally, you're the subject of threats right now.
As anyone who speaks out on the question of Palestine today, which includes many Jewish people, and anyone else. So I'm in good company, let me tell you.
Do you feel, A, it's worth it, and B, you're achieving anything right now?
I don't know. Worth is not the first word that comes to my mind.
Well, your personal security is in jeopardy right now.
Oh, yeah. I'm asking myself, I have 2 young children. So my answer is no one in my life is more important than anyone else, including you, Krishnan. So if you were in Gaza with your family, you would be very happy to have someone like me taking the risk, because you would be seen, at least. So worse is not exactly the word that comes to mind.
Francesca Albanese masterclass in calling out contradictions head-on was a meticulous and showful dismantle of Krishnan's arguments, laying bare how his selective outrage conveniently excuses war crimes while glossing over the brutal reality of occupation and targeted violence. Rather than indulging in empty rhetoric, her words in this interview offer a clear, uncompromising analysis of international law, highlighting the stark double standards that allow dangerous narratives to persist. With a mix of biting humor and raw honesty, Francesca doesn't just debate, she dismantles the flimsy excuses, proving that when you stick to facts, there's no room for half-truth or inconvenient misinterpretations. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and share y'alls, and I hope to catch you on the next one.